as these policy initiatives are announced and regulatory flexibilities being proposed, the devil though is in the details, and reviewers still have to be convinced of the scientific evidence generated under those new flexibilities.
Hello, I'm Wayne Pines. Welcome to bonus episode 8 of FDA Watch. We're approaching the end of the year and the holidays, so we're going to be spending some time on this podcast looking back at what has been an unprecedented year for FDA and for many others in the federal government. I do want to start, as I always do, by asking you to subscribe to our podcast. Go to fdawatch.net. It's free. You'll get an email every time a podcast is posted. And if you do go to fdawatch.net, you can also listen to earlier podcasts. We just completed a 4-part series with the law firm Hyman, Phelps, and McNamara that covered a wide range of FDA issues. There are other podcasts there that are still current, even though they were recorded a little while ago because we covered general subjects. Let's meet our guest today, Dr. Ritu Nalubola. She spent 25 years at FDA in various senior leadership roles. She was Associate Commissioner for Policy. She was Acting Deputy Commissioner for Policy Legislation and International Affairs. She led the agency's Europe office as a director for nearly 5 years. Her work has focused generally on policy. She left the agency this past summer to join a healthcare consulting firm, Marwood Group. So welcome to FDA Watch, Ritu. Good to see you.
Thank you, Wayne. Really appreciate this opportunity to have this conversation with you.
So let's jump right into it. I want to start out with your general views of what's occurred at FDA over the past few months and over the past year. The agency last December was different than it is now. Today, the staff is smaller. Some top people have left. There's been some directional changes. What stands out to you in terms of the changes that have taken place since the beginning of this administration?
Yeah, there have been a number of changes, including on the staffing side, leadership changes, as we all have been tracking those developments. From my perspective, given my work has been on the policy side for a number of years, I'm looking at what's coming from the agency under the new leadership from a policy lens. So initiatives on the policy side in response to executive orders and directives and in support of the broader administration goals, as well as the policy process. A number of deregulatory initiatives have been, we've heard about those, some already in implementation, and, they cut across the entire continuum of drug discovery, development, and the goal of increasing availability of products and getting them to the marketplace faster. So a lot of the deregulatory agenda initiatives, and we can go through some of those examples as well.
Right. Are there any policies beyond deregulation that sort of stand out? There have been a number of initiatives that this administration has undertaken. What else stands out? Before I want to do a deep dive into deregulation, but let's start out with an overview as to the general direction of the agency these days.
Yeah, I'm looking at the policy initiatives and sort of distill them down to 3 buckets. Deregulation across a number of areas, including domestic manufacturing. The second bucket for me that stands out is the innovation space, especially in the AI. New executive order that came out and multiple activities that FDA has already initiated, complementary to things that are happening at the administration level as well. And then the third area is related to supply chain and securing the drug supply chain in the U.S. So those are sort of 3 big areas that I've been tracking.
Okay, well let's start deep diving, as they say. Deregulation. How have you seen deregulation play out at the agency? What new policies are particularly noteworthy?
Yeah, I can highlight a few. None of this is surprising. A lot of these have received, a great level of attention in the media and the press. So, domestic manufacturing is one where FDA has taken a number of steps. We have the PreCheck program, which is the two-phased approach for first with the facility readiness phase, where FDA intends to be able to engage with manufacturers in the facility design and construction, and then there's the second phase during the application, having pre-application meetings and early feedback from FDA. Also related to domestic manufacturing, we saw FDA announce a new pilot program to incentivize U.S. generic drug manufacturing and testing, where FDA indicated that it would prioritize review of ANDAs where bioequivalence testing is performed in the U.S. and the finished product is manufactured in the U.S. with exclusively domestic sourced API. So both intended to bolster domestic manufacturing. Then in other areas, for example, in the rare diseases space, we saw Dr. Prasad sort of outline their thinking on the new plausible mechanism pathway, which built on an announcement earlier this year on rare disease evidence principles, also highlighting FDA's previous guidance on that with respect to using confirmatory evidence where appropriate. There's the biosimilar space where also FDA issued a new draft guidance making it clear that comparative clinical studies may not be necessary, and comparative analytical assessments and other immunogenicity and pharmacokinetic data could be used in support of demonstration of biosimilarity. Similarly, we are seeing initiatives in the clinical trial space where FDA leadership has indicated interest in modernizing clinical trials. We looked at the September Unified Agenda where FDA has indicated 2 regulations in the works related to IRBs and human subject protections. There's also the generic space where, again, FDA has some upcoming regulatory actions on bioequivalence and bioavailability studies. All of these to support the development of generics and biosimilars. And of course, there's the Commissioner's National Priority Voucher program that's received a lot of attention. FDA has issued 15 vouchers to date. More news to come on that. We haven't seen any decisions yet. I view many of these as positive for the biotech sector. It reflects a heightened interest and a certain level of urgency, not only from the executive branch, but we've also seen briefings on the Hill to promote and maintain U.S. competitiveness in this area. The question, though, is how exactly all of these policy initiatives will play out in reality, to what extent they will achieve the stated objectives of getting products to patients faster and improving affordability, and how effectiveness will be measured. All of this is sort of unclear and to be seen, but the outlook for industry, I would say, generally is optimistic.
Good. Okay. I wanted to talk specifically about incentive programs. FDA generally doesn't do incentive programs historically. The voucher program, which you mentioned, PreCheck program. How do you react to the concept of FDA having incentive programs that, in some cases, are designed to advance a larger agenda?
Yeah, we get this question a lot. Also about how FDA, how this sort of impacts the FDA's capacity to implement all of these policies around incentivization. With the multiple initiatives that are being directed at the agency staff, I think it's logical, right, to question as to which ones are specifically a priority. If everything is a priority, nothing becomes a priority, and how agency resources will be factored into the implementation, especially with recent staffing cuts and departures. For the commissioner's voucher program, for example, right? So FDA has issued about 15 vouchers with a commitment to reduce the review time to 1 to 2 months compared to the standard 10 to 12 months. It's unclear what this means for the traditional priority vouchers and designations already awarded and being handled often by the same review divisions. We also don't know how many voucher candidates have been formally submitted for FDA review, although I've seen reports that at least a few are pending at the agency. Agency has not announced any decisions so far, but a question about how to maintain that balance around priorities and staffing resources definitely is one to think about. Similarly, the PreCheck program, that will necessitate active engagement from both review staff as well as investigators from FDA. And this announcement about the PreCheck program also comes as FDA has expressed its intent to work more on foreign inspections, sort of to level the playing field for domestic and foreign facility inspections. So often it's the same review teams that are engaged in all of these different priority work streams because of the expertise that's unique and that's needed for these evaluations. My expectation is that FDA leadership is considering these prioritization areas thoughtfully to make sure the review teams and inspections and investigations teams are adequately resourced and supported as they can conduct this important work.
Right. When you were at the agency, of course, whenever you implemented a new policy, you had to be sure that the staff was able to do it and that there was adequate staff. Now we have fewer people at the agency than we did earlier in the year. Do you have confidence that there are enough people at the agency and the right people to implement all of these incentive programs? What would you, if you were at the agency right now, what would you be thinking about in terms of staffing?
Well, I would be talking to the staff, and I hope the agency leadership has considered that in making these commitments for such shortened time frames. It's unclear where exactly those efficiencies are going to be built in, but that would have been my first decision point in having that feedback from the divisions and the staff and the leadership in those teams that actually are conducting this work, and then to help prioritize among all of the different objectives and goals that the agency is trying to achieve.
Right. And now you've been for a few months on the outside consulting. And I'm going to ask you the same question about a number of these initiatives. But what are you telling your clients these days, outside the agency, how they should be reacting to what's going on at the agency with regard to some of these programs?
Yeah, I mean, our clients, our input is that to stay the course, to continue to engage with FDA. Some of the things that we're hearing is, despite all of the sort of noise and signals at the departures and ongoing transitions, I think at the review staff level, the work is ongoing. That continues. FDA has some of the most dedicated and talented professionals dedicated to the mission, and that work seems to be continuing. And so, our advice is to continue to engage with the agency and get that feedback, especially as some of these flexibilities in policies are announced, to see how those impact the specific reviews of their products.
Yeah, are you seeing a slowdown at the agency in terms of some of the decision making? Again, based on what you've seen, both in your, in the time that you were still at the agency this calendar year, as well as since you've left the agency.
We've been tracking at Marwood some of the approvals, both on drugs, biologics, first generics. It seems like the run rate uh, for 2025 is slightly behind, not too far behind, but slightly behind where we were in 2024 at the same time. We've also looked at some of the PDUFA timelines. I know the agency has missed a few, but not by too much. So I feel confident that the agency, at least at the staff level and the reviewers level, that work seems to be continuing. We'll have to wait and see, though, where the approval trends end up at the end of the year. Of course, the number of approvals is not all dependent on FDA. Of course, we have there's a number of factors that go into the final tally.
Yeah, what people don't understand about the agency sometimes is that when you look at numbers of approvals, that's going to be a function of the applications that the agency receives. The agency can't generate its own applications. It relies on the industry. And so the number of approvals will be directly correlated with the number of applications
Exactly.
they receive. And that, and I think it's important for people to understand that when we look at year-end numbers. Sometimes setting those goals isn't necessarily a good idea because there are so many variables that are involved. I want to ask you, bottom line of FDA is consumer protection, the safety of products. And you've talked about streamlining regulation. We've talked about deregulation. We've talked about new policies. Talked about cutbacks in staff. How do you see that affecting product safety per se? Or are we just as safe as Americans today as we were a year ago in terms of product safety involving the products regulated by FDA?
Well, I mean, public health protection is FDA's mission, right, first and foremost, and I have no doubt FDA staff will continue to fulfill that mission with the same passion and dedication as it always has. Over the years, my years at the FDA, I've worked on emerging technologies a lot, where we've had to navigate the multiple scientific and other inherent uncertainties of emerging technologies to promote safe and responsible innovation. And so, in that respect, I don't think the current deregulatory agenda and the regulatory flexibilities necessarily present, unique or novel considerations that the agency has not previously encountered or is not equipped to manage. Consumer protection is always first, and FDA reviews its regulations to remove unnecessary burdens and introduce flexibilities. I feel confident in the agency's expertise to maintain that balance, including pre and post market factors, so as to not jeopardize consumer protection while getting products to the market more efficiently. In fact, to me, a couple of the recent CRLs sort of underscore that careful deliberation by the agency scientists, where FDA determined that the products do not adequately meet pre-market safety or efficacy standards, despite the agency's overall stance to loosen some of those pre-market requirements as a matter of policy. So I would say that, as these policy initiatives are announced and regulatory flexibilities being proposed, the devil, though, is in the details, and reviewers still have to be convinced of the scientific evidence generated under those new flexibilities.
Right. Now, the agency has announced that they're going to be hiring a number of new people. Talk a little bit about, from your perspective, about what is involved in bringing on new people and training them. How long does it take? I know this is a very general question, and it's going to be specific to the job that people are filling, but talk a little bit about the need to, be brought up to date, so to speak, and learn FDA policies and FDA procedures in order to really be contributing a member of the FDA staff.
Well, Yeah, I mean, as you said, I think it it depends on the nature of the work that's assigned to the new staff. But FDA is a unique organization. It needs, you need the scientific expertise. You need to understand, the legal and the regulatory landscape, and then especially in the policy area, it's trying to find that right balance, understanding the science, understanding our legal sandbox within which we can then formulate policies. So I would say, it takes time for people coming in to the agency, especially on the policy side, to navigate those, to understand how the agency works, its culture, um, the multiple perspectives, not always aligned across the agency, but also across the other federal agencies and sister agencies, and being able to navigate all that. So it does take a good amount of time to get people trained and to think in that way. And I would expect, I mean, I'm speaking from the policy office perspective, because that's where I was, but I would say even for the reviewer staff, bringing in new people and investigators also, it's a very unique expertise, and that takes time for people to be trained and be able to work more independently.
I want to ask you about the global supply chain. Uh, you're a former director of the Europe office. What are your views on efforts such as using tariffs and most favored nation uh, policies in terms of how they impact FDA and the regulated industry?
Yeah, this one's been pretty interesting for me to watch, all of the developments related to drug supply chain and trade, now as an outsider as opposed to being in the agency. Um, Supply chain resiliency has been a goal of administrations, of course, since vulnerabilities in the US drug supply became so glaringly clear during COVID. There have been a number of directives since then, and FDA has done a lot of work in this space, always within the boundaries of FDA's legal mandate. And we work very closely with other entities in the HHS and elsewhere in the government, where who have more drug pricing and other such economic considerations well within their jurisdiction. FDA also, like, for example, in the legal authorities space, there are gaps in our knowledge that FDA has acknowledged and asked for additional authorities in this regard in the past. What I find interesting in the current approach is what I see as sort of a carrot and stick approach of the current administration. So the White House has issued tariffs and MFN related directives, and then also followed later, issuing a letter to pharma manufacturers, in response to which some firms have already struck deals on MFN pricing, along with commitments to expand investments in US manufacturing so as to secure immunity from potential tariffs, right? So in contrast to those sort of quote unquote threats to industry that are being implemented by other parts of the US government, I see FDA's role is more of the soft power and on a positive note, where the agency is offering incentives and early assistance and more hands on engagement for industry to have successful regulatory submissions. The PreCheck program, the generic drugs with the US footprint that are prioritized for review. Those are some of the examples. As far as impacts to FDA from some of this work, I mean, we've talked about prioritization and resources. So perhaps maybe I could make one other point. I see agency policies now more directly linked to lowering drug prices and onshoring drug manufacturing. The CNPD program, for example, identifies lower drug prices and domestic manufacturing as reasons for FDA to grant those positive incentives. And critics have legitimately, I think, expressed concerns that some of these rushed reviews could undermine public confidence. It's also unclear where those efficiencies will be built into the review process to reduce the timeline so drastically. I've also seen some lawmakers trying to better understand FDA's selection of the candidates and the legal basis of the program, how it will be implemented within staffing resources. So I do hope there will be greater transparency from FDA as these programs are implemented, so we may be able to glean further as those first decisions are announced.
Right. We're talking about tariffs. We're talking about MFN, most favored nation. I've been involved with FDA for many, many decades, and I think this is the first time ever that I've used the word tariff or MFN in conjunction with anything having to do with FDA. You were there for 25 years in policy capacities, and of course, as director of the European office. How does it feel for us to be talking about FDA and using words like tariffs and MFN in the context of the agency's work?
Yeah, I mean, that's the part that I think it's unusual. These are issues that FDA has generally taken a light touch on, deferring to other parts of the administration, other parts of the department. And so we'll have to wait and see as FDA provides more information on the program and responds to some of the questions that have that others in the community, in the also on the Hill, have raised to FDA. So I guess we'll wait. We'll have to see how the agency responds to some of those questions.
Right. Well, it certainly is new for me to be using these words, and I know for a lot of other people. But
Yes.
My view is that the agency has always been resilient in responding to challenges, and now there are new challenges on a global basis, and the agency will respond appropriately and, as always, do a good job. We're going to take a short break now. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. And we're back. We're talking with Dr. Ritu Nalubola from the Marwood Group, previously with FDA, 25 years in the policy area, and as director of the FDA Europe office. Let's start the rest of our conversation by talking about innovation. Some of your significant contributions at FDA have been in the area of emerging technologies, most recently in the AI space. How do you see the agency regulating AI, and what's the agency's role in building up the data infrastructure?
Yeah, this is actually an exciting area, Wayne. So over the past decade, FDA has built extensive experience regulating AI, particularly in the medical devices space, and also to a lesser extent, but also significant experience in AI application in the drug development space. I remember my work working in the Europe office, and FDA has always been a pioneer in the regulation of digital health innovations, and many of our European counterparts looked to some of the work on the policy front coming from FDA to help support that innovation. FDA has issued a number of guidances over the years, and as AI has evolved more recently, also updated guidances and issued new ones, both for medical devices and drugs, which they're now having to revisit under the current administration's new executive order. I think the current administration has taken a more aggressive approach to AI in that they're seeking to expand the regulatory framework to support greater innovation and uptake of AI, both among the government agencies as well as the industry. The new executive order also places greater emphasis on promoting innovation and regulatory flexibility. That is aligned with the overall deregulatory stance of this administration. The EO also, and there was a subsequent AI action plan, both highlight the administration's policy agenda, starting with revisiting previous AI policies, identifying those that hinder innovation, and creating a more conducive regulatory environment for AI development. So there's a number of follow-on activities that have happened since then. OSTP has issued an RFI seeking public comment. Similarly, FDA issued an RFI on AI-enabled medical devices. FDA has held workshops. There was also a recent Digital Health Advisory Committee on AI and digital mental health applications. So, agencies consider taking input, looking at the new executive order, considering public input, and I expect there will be more coming from the agency, both on the guidances that have been issued in the past, either to finalize those or issue new ones or revise those. In any case, I personally do not expect a transformational shift in how FDA regulates AI products, because FDA has traditionally been forward-leaning in that space, engaged with developers actively along the way to support innovation and while ensuring patient safety. And I think the current policies already reflect that stance. That said, I expect FDA may update or clarify some of its recommendations, taking into account the recent advances as well as the public feedback.
Yeah, do you have any insights on how the private sector, we know we're both now in the private sector, how the private sector is collaborating with FDA in terms of bringing up to date all of the various processes and implementing AI appropriately across the FDA spectrum? What's going on in the private sector?
Yeah, there's a lot happening. I think this is one of the more promising activities in this entire front. There was recent initiatives announced both at HHS on health data. That's the one that I think has long been understood as a challenge in advancing AI applications for lack of robust fit for purpose data sets for development and testing, for allowing assessment in diverse population groups or minimization of bias. And we know the healthcare system is full of valuable patient data that is in disconnected systems. And FDA has long highlighted these data challenges. So now having the private sector more actively engaged through the HHS Health Data Sharing Initiative. There was also the new executive order launching what is referred to as the Genesis mission. They're looking to sort of have a national coordinated effort to accelerate use of AI and to build an American science and security platform. These are promising developments because they also have commitments from big tech, and private sector collaborations in this area are really going to be key to help drive applications.
Right. I'm going to ask you to look to the future here in terms of AI. AI is clearly the future in so many areas. What do you see as the trajectory for AI? It's used in medical products. It's used in terms of evaluating adverse reactions to various medical products, in terms of AI being regulated by the agency. A little crystal balling here. What do you see going on over the next few years in terms of AI?
Well, I think the tech's active investments in health data, I think, will drive some of this innovation. They've already pledged to work on some of these help build an interoperable digital health ecosystem that can enmesh some of the government's large data sets with the advanced computing capabilities of private sectors, and how that can help FDA and researchers and sponsors, as well as help with data mining to be able to provide some of the real world data and real world evidence and the analytics, linking various data sets to be able to support clinical evidence. And then on the specific products front too, we know that at least per FDA's recent account, there are over 1,250 AI-enabled medical devices that are listed in the FDA database. Radiology seems to be by far at the forefront of AI transformation, but there are others that we're seeing in the cardiology front. So I expect we could see some expansion there. On the CEDAR front, they've noted over 500 regulatory submissions to date across the entire drug product life cycle, including non-clinical, clinical, post-market, and manufacturing phases. And I think as we have, some of these RWD analytics through, for example, the NIH's real-world data platform that's been highlighted as a priority in the MAHA strategy, we can see more use of AI in the drug development, drug discovery phase. For example, in the early phase clinical trials, we've already seen use of AI from patient recruitment to trial design to site selection, patient adherence, and then some of the data management and analyses. Their integration of AI in the planning and the conduct of clinical trials can accelerate the process. So I expect those would be areas we could see more. And then on the FDA side, we've seen FDA announce the launch of ELSA, an LLM-powered AI tool in June to incorporate efficiencies into agencies' operations. And then just yesterday, FDA announced the launch of a 2-month agentic AI challenge for staff to build AI solutions into their workflows. And FDA expects to be able to further advance the use of AI in various tasks, from meeting management to some of the more complex pre-market reviews or review validation and post-market surveillance inspections. FDA has already explored the inspections area in the past with the seafood pilot, where they've seen good results. But, I think especially as we find more flexibilities on the pre-market side, I expect there will be a greater emphasis on the post-market regulatory strategies, and AI can really help in that regard.
Is it fair to say, my view is that AI is going to transform not just the rest of the world, but particularly FDA in terms of many of its functions. And I think you've done a great job. It's clear that you're right on top of a lot of the changes that are going to take place. So are you optimistic that this will all work and that FDA is going to be able to manage the implementation of AI? This has nothing to do with any changes from a political standpoint. It just has to do with the advent of AI.
Yeah, no, FDA has a lot of experience already in the AI space. More than 1,250 products or 1,250 AI-enabled medical devices, and nearly 500 or so in the drug space. So agency already has a lot of experience. I think there have been some challenges that FDA has long identified. A lot of them related to data quality, the potential bias, data drift or hallucinations, and then validation of models, and then more broadly, the questions about data privacy, security, some of the ethical considerations, and the need for human intervention so that AI can augment and not necessarily replace human judgment or decision making unless appropriate to do that. So I think, as some of these data initiatives begin to take shape, and some of the challenges that FDA has identified are addressed, we may be able to see, get more momentum in the applications. And there are concerted efforts for developing best practices in this area so that there's a governance structure and common standards that can be implemented, and so the cross-disciplinary collaborations and strategies to address these challenges that we touched on some earlier, I think can really help drive innovation.
Final question, Ritu. While you've got your crystal ball out, look to the next year, 2026, broadly on the policy front. You were responsible for policy at the agency for such a long time. What changes do you see happening on the policy front over the next year?
I think FDA has already signaled where they want to go on the policy front. Many of those initiatives are in response to executive orders that came out this year. So I expect in 2026 there will be an implementation of policies that have been announced. How exactly and how much traction they get in terms of sponsors coming in for using some of these flexibilities, I think we'll have to see. But I think the policy development process itself, though, the agency has already announced, so I think they will finalize some of those draft guidances. And then we're looking at the Unified Agenda 2 that came out in September, and there are some additional potentially deregulatory activities that are listed there. So I expect some movement on that. But stepping back from the policy front, for me, feel like this year has just been such a tumultuous one for FDA. We've all been through transitions, and some level of disruption is expected as new leadership comes in and sets the policy direction and priorities for the agencies. But the changes that the agency has been through this year just seem unlike any of recent history, at least to my knowledge, not only with respect to the change across all staffing levels, but also the pace with which those changes were executed and this extended period of leadership changes too, I imagine places significant strain on the staff within the agency, who truly are the most talented and selfless professionals dedicated to the public health mission. So I certainly hope 2026 brings some steadiness and stability and a regular rhythm as the agency implements all of these various policy initiatives.
I think that's a good place to end here. Ritu, thanks for being on the podcast today. That's been a great summary of what's going on in the AI area, what's going on in the policy area. Really appreciate it. I also want to thank our podcast creator and producer, Michael Levin Epstein, our assistant producers, Sam Hoffmeister. I want to remind you, as I say at the end of all of the podcast, if you want to be a guest, if you want to be a marketing partner, if you want to be a sponsor, if you want to comment on the show, you can contact us at info@fdawatch.net, info@fdawatch.net. That's our website, fdawatch.net. Finally, we'd appreciate it if you're so inclined to give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. It really, really does make a difference. We're also interested in making sure that you are subscribed so that you get a notice whenever there is a new episode of FDA Watch. As we say at the end of every episode of FDA Watch, if you really want to watch what FDA is doing, listen to FDA Watch.